Sins and death of Ahaz. Now, in the time of his distress, King Ahaz became increasingly unfaithful to the Lord. And the king said, I shall seek the gods of Damascus who defeated me. And he said, because of the gods of the king Syria help them. I will sacrifice to them, and they will help me. But they were the ruin of him and all Israel. So Ahaz gathered the articles of the house of God, cut the articles of the house of God in pieces, shut the doors of the house of the Lord, and made altars for himself in every corner of Jerusalem. And in every single city of Judah, he made high places to burn incense to foreign gods, and provoked the Lord God of his fathers and to anger. Now, the rest of his acts and all his deeds, from the first to last, indeed they are written in the book of Kings of Judah and Israel. So Ahaz rested with his fathers, and they buried him in the city in Jerusalem. But they did not place him in the tombs of the kings of Israel. Then Hezekiah, his son, reigned in his place. Hezekiah is king of Judah. Hezekiah became king when he was 25 years old, and he reigned for 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah, and he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, according to everything his father David had done, cleansing the temple. In the first year of his reign, in the first month, he opened the doors of the house of the Lord and repaired them. Then he brought in the priests and the Levites and gathered them in the east square, and said to them, Hear me, Levites. Now sanctify yourselves, sanctify the house of the Lord God of your fathers, and cast out the uncleanness from the holy place. For our fathers trespassed and did evil in the eyes of the Lord our God. They forsook him. They turned their faces away from the dwelling place of the Lord and turned their backs on him. They also shut up the doors of the temple, put out the lamps, and did not burn incense or offer burnt offerings in the holy place to the God of Israel. Therefore, the Lord turned his anger against Judah and Jerusalem, and as you see with your eyes, he gave them up to terror, to desolation, and to jeering. For indeed, because of this, our fathers fell by the sword, and our wives, our sons, and our daughters are in captivity. Now, it is in my heart to make a covenant with Lord God of Israel, to turn the fierce wrath of his anger from us. Now, do not be negligent, for the Lord chose you to stand before him and to serve him, to minister to him, and to burn incense. Then these Levites arose, the sons of Kohath, Mahath, the son of Amasai, and Joel, the son of Azariah. Of the sons of Merari, Kish, the son of Abdi, and Azariah, the son of Jehaleel of the Gershonites. Joah, the son of Zima, and Eden, the son of Joah. Of Elizaphan, Shimri, and Jeel. Of the sons of Azaph, Zechariah, and Mattaniah. Of the sons of Heman, Jehiel, and Shimei. And of the sons of Jeduthun, Shemaiah, and Uzziel. And they gathered their brethren and sanctified themselves according to the commandment of the king and at the words of the Lord, to cleanse the house of the Lord. Then the priests went into the house of the Lord to cleanse it, and they brought out all the uncleanness they found in the temple of the Lord and in the court of the house of the Lord. And the Levites took it out and carried it to the brook Kidron. They began to sanctify it on the first day of the first month, and on the 8th day of the month they came to the vestibule of the Lord. They sanctified the house of the Lord in 8 days and finished on the 16th day of the first month. And they went into King Hezekiah and said, We have cleansed everything in the house of the Lord, the altar of burnt offerings with all its articles, and the table of the showbread with all its articles. Moreover, We have prepared and sanctified all the articles King Ahaz prepared, and went into King Hezekiah and said, and they went into King Hezekiah and said, we have cleansed everything in the house of the Lord, the altar of burnt offerings with all its articles, and the table of the showbread with all its articles. Moreover, we have prepared and sanctified all the articles King Ahaz polluted in his reign and his apostasy. We have prepared and sanctified them all, and there they are before the altar of the Lord. Worship is restored. King Hezekiah rose early, gathered the rulers of the city, and went up to the house of the Lord. He offered 7 calves, 7 rams, 7 lambs, and 7 male goats for a sin offering for the kingdom, for the sanctuary, and for Judah. Then he commanded the priests, the sons of Aaron, to offer them on the altar of the Lord. So they sanctified the calves, and the priests received blood and sprinkled it on the altar. Likewise, they sacrificed the rams and sprinkled the blood on the altar. They also killed the lambs and sprinkled the blood on the altar. Then they brought out the male goats for the sin offering before the king and the assembly, and they laid their hands on them, and the priests sacrificed them. They presented their blood on the altar as a sin offering to make an atonement for all Israel. For the king commanded that the burnt offering and the sin offering he made for all Israel. And he stationed the Levites in the house of the Lord with cymbals, with stringed instruments, and with harps, according to the commandment of David, and Gad, the king's seer, and Nathan the prophet. For this was the commandment of the Lord by his prophets. The Levites stood with instruments of David, and the priests with the trumpets. Then Hezekiah commanded them to offer the burnt offering on the altar. And when the burnt offering began, they started to sing to the Lord with the trumpets and with the instruments of David, king of Israel. So all the assembly worshipped. The singers sang, and the trumpets sounded until the burnt offering was finished. And when they had finished offering, the king and all who were present with him bowed. And King Hezekiah and the leaders commanded the Levites to sing praise to the Lord with the words of David and Asaph the prophet. So they sang praises with gladness and bowed their heads and worshipped. Then Hezekiah spoke up and said, now that you have cleansed your hands for the Lord, come near and bring sacrifices and thank offerings into the house of the Lord. So the assembly brought sacrifices and thank offerings, and all who were of a willing heart brought burnt offerings. And the number of the burnt offerings the assembly brought was 70 calves, 100 rams, and 200 lambs. All these were for a burnt offering to the Lord, and there were 600 consecrated calves and 3,000 sheep. But there were not enough priests, so they could not skin all the burnt offerings. Therefore, their brethren, the Levites, helped them until the task was finished, and until the priests had sanctified themselves. For the Levites were more diligent in sanctifying themselves than the priests. There were many burnt offerings, with the fat of the peace offerings and with the drink offerings. For every burnt offering, so the service of the house of the Lord was set in order. Then Hezekiah and all the people rejoiced that God had prepared the people since the events took place so suddenly. Hezekiah celebrates the Passover. Hezekiah sent word to all Israel and Judah and wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh, telling them to come to the house of the Lord at Jerusalem and keep the Passover of the Lord God of Israel. For the king and his leaders and all the assembly in Jerusalem had agreed to keep the Passover in the second month, for they could not keep it at a regular time, because a sufficient number of priests had not consecrated themselves, and the people had not gathered in Jerusalem. And the matter pleased the king and the assembly, so they resolved to make a proclamation throughout all Israel from Beersheba to Dan that they should come to keep the Passover to the Lord God of Israel at Jerusalem since they had not done in the prescribed manner for a long time. Then the runners went throughout all Israel and Judah with the letters from the king and his leaders, and spoke according to the command of the king. Sons of Israel, return to the Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Then he will return to the remnant of you who escaped from the hand of the king of Assyria. Do not be like your fathers and your brethren who rebelled against the Lord God of their fathers. So he gave them up to desolation, as you see. Do not be stiff-necked as your fathers were. Give glory to the Lord God and enter his sanctuary, which he sanctified forever. Serve the Lord your God, so that he turns the fierceness of his wrath away from you. For if you return to the Lord, your brethren and your children will be treated with compassion by those who led them captive, so they may come back to this land. For the Lord your God is gracious and merciful, and he will turn his face from us if we return to him. So the runners passed from city to city, through Mount Ephraim and Manasseh, and as far as Zebulun, but the people laughed at them and mocked them. Nevertheless, some from Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun were ashamed and came to Jerusalem. At the word of the Lord, the hand of God was on Judah to give them singleness of heart, to obey the command of the king and their leaders. Now, many people, a very great assembly, gathered at Jerusalem to keep the feast of the unleavened bread. In the second month, they arose and took away the altars in Jerusalem, and they took away all the altars on which they burned incense to the false gods and cast them into the brook Kidron. Then they slaughtered the Passover lambs on the 14th day of the second month. The priests and the Levites were ashamed and sanctified them, the priests and the Levites were ashamed and sanctified themselves, and they brought the burnt offerings to the house of the Lord. They stood in their place according to their custom, according to the law of Moses, the man of God. The priests received the blood from the hand of the Levites, for there were many in the assembly who had not sanctified themselves. Therefore, the Levites had charge of the slaughter of the Passover lambs for all those who were not able to sanctify themselves to the Lord. Most of the people from Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, and Zebulun had not cleansed themselves, but they ate the Passover contrary to what was written. But Hezekiah prayed for them, saying, May the good Lord provide atonement for everyone who prepares his heart to seek God, the Lord God of his fathers, even though he is not cleansed according to the purification of the sanctuary. And the Lord listened to Hezekiah and healed the people. So the sons of Israel who were present at Jerusalem kept the feast of unleavened bread for 7 days with great gladness. And the Levites and the priests praised the Lord every day, singing to the Lord with instruments. And Hezekiah encouraged all the Levites who knew the good knowledge of the Lord. And they completed the feast in 7 days, offering peace offerings and making confession to the Lord God of their fathers. And the whole assembly agreed to keep the feast for another 7 days. And so they kept it another 7 days with great joy. For King Hezekiah began the sacrifice for the assembly of Judah with 1,000 calves and 7,000 sheep. And the leaders began the sacrifice for the assembly with 1,000 calves and 10,000 sheep. And there was an abundance of holy things for the priests. The whole assembly rejoiced along with the priests and Levites. All the assembly of Judah and those who came from Israel, the sojourners who came from the land of Israel, and those who dwelt in Judah. So there was great joy in Jerusalem, for since the time of King Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, there had been no feast like this in Jerusalem. Then the priests and the Levites arose and blessed the people, and their voice was heard, and their prayer came up to his holy dwelling place in heaven. Notes from the previous page, 29, 1 through 11. Hezekiah prefigures Christ who opened the doors to heaven, gathered the faithful, and set captives free. See 4th Kings 18, 1 through 8, 29, 12 through 30. The Levites and priests prefigure the apostles and the evangelists, who will restore right worship under Christ's leadership. The brook Kidron is a type of baptism which will sanctify the faithful. 2934. The desire of Levites to be sanctified exceeds that of the priests, showing that it is the state of the heart, not the office held, which determines true holiness. 2936. God had prepared the people. Christ warns his followers to watch, for you do not know when the matter of the house is coming, lest coming suddenly he find you sleeping. Mark 13:35-36. See also Malachi 3:1. 31 through 21. Because Judah had fallen deeply into sin, the first week of Passover feast was not kept to the letter of the law. Yet God heard Hezekiah's prayer, gave the people singleness of hearts, and healed them. Hezekiah prefigures Christ, who will do the same for all that follow him with contrite hearts in the midst of a broken world.